Hi everyone and welcome back to the Spiritual Outcast. I'm your host Sky Kristen and it has been a while. It has been about a year since I've uploaded a podcast episode. I'm also navigating filming this for YouTube. So to my subscribers who may or may not have known that I even had a podcast, if you didn't know, that's fine because I have not uploaded in a year, like I said, but we're back. I'm feeling really fancy with this microphone and this whole setup right now. It's a little overwhelming, I'm not gonna lie. Last year when I was doing this podcast, I would usually be in a very quiet, dark space, not camera ready at all, just with my notes curled up and recording my podcast. And I feel like I'm in such a different place now and I want to get into it. I have a lot of things that I'm excited to talk about in this podcast. Coming back after a year felt, again, overwhelming. So yeah, 2022 was a huge year for me spiritually, just in my evolution. That's why I started the Spiritual Outcast to begin with in January. And I stopped around April 2022. So it has been exactly a year, which is just so wild that now is the time that I'm coming back, because I've thought about doing it so many times in the past couple months, but it just never felt like the right time. And when I sat down to write this episode and really dive into the things that I wanted to share and talk about, there's no way I would be able to be in this place talking about these things at any other time other than right now. And before I get into it, what I mean by that is in January, I felt like I was really entering this new era of myself. It felt the ideas were overflowing of what I wanted to do, and I felt very compelled to share with people, which again is why I started the podcast. And by April 2022, so I forget when the last episode I uploaded was, but I started to go through, I feel like a lot of people would maybe call it, in the spiritual community, the dark night of the soul. I've never considered it that for myself, but if we're gonna get technical, that's really what started happening. When you decide that you want to change or, be a different person or evolve or let go of certain behaviors, when you decide and become aware of that, that's not the day that you change. That's just the day that you became aware that you want to change. And that is exactly what I was struggling with April of last year. I was very aware of old habits, of old ways that I would live my life and also just react. And I was able to be in a place of awareness of knowing that that is not who I am anymore, yet still reacting, still acting in those ways, which is very normal now that I'm vocalizing it out loud. But a year ago, I did not realize that. I was like, I'm aware of why I act this way. I was getting deep into shadow work, which again, I don't want to just throw out words. I feel like I used to do that in my podcast last year, is just throw out these words. And I feel like that's why there's such a disconnect, with the spiritual community and maybe people who want to get into it, is just not really understanding. And so shadow work, everyone's going to have their own description of shadow work and ways that they maneuver with it. I very much would do a lot of introspecting and journaling. And, I was aware of, for example, my trauma responses. I was aware of how I was acting in the world from a mentality of my past, yet I was still acting that way. And one thing I realized was that I've always been this way. I have always felt and thought like I was one step ahead of how I was acting. I've always been a little bit disappointed in how I show up in the world because mentally I've passed that. But, my habits weren't fully in alignment yet. And I would look at this as such a frustrating thing. I was always so frustrated that I would feel this way. I would always feel almost like a fraud. Like, I think I'm this person, I say I'm this person, but then I act in such a different way. Like it felt childish. I would put myself down and be disappointed in myself. And I'm realizing now that it is such a superpower, though at the same time, it doesn't take away from the fact that it is frustrating. To know who you want to be, where you want to be, but be acting not in alignment with that is very frustrating. But, what's the opposite? Not being aware, not really having a plan of action for your growth and where you want to go, and, not being pleased with where you are. That doesn't sound like a better option either. I've realized over this past year that is what keeps me growing, and to just be okay with the person that I currently am and know that I have this vision of who I'm becoming, and just slowly becoming that person, and not being so angry at myself for not being that person right away, because that is impossible. Our habits are rooted in our brain. So many ways that we maneuver through this world. A lot of it is trauma responses. A lot of it is deep-seated habits, mindsets that took years to develop and will take years to undevelop. But one thing that I was really struggling with about a year ago, April of last year, was, as I was going through all that and all those realizations, I would keep saying, who am I to give advice? Like, who am I to share what I'm going through when I can't even be authentic? That's how I felt. When I knew I wanted to be a certain way and I wasn't, my actions, my habits, my thoughts, my words weren't in alignment with that, I felt like a fraud. And it became harder and harder to sit in front of this microphone and help people and give advice and talk about what I'm going through. But again, it's good to remember that the day you become aware of the things that you want to change is not the day that you change. And if you think that way, and I thought that way, you are just planning for disaster, planning for feeling like a fraud in your everyday life, never feeling good enough, not feeling like you're on track, not feeling authentic, and just so many negative emotions that you don't need to be dealing with. If anything, you should be so proud that you are making the conscious effort to want to change, being gentle with yourself, knowing that these things take time. Because, for example, a lot of our personality is made up of trauma responses. And we don't know this, like a lot of people, you think it's who you are. It's who you've always been, and it's who you are, and it's part of your personality. And when you take the time to sit with that, and to sit with the parts of you that you don't really like, but you just act out of habit, you're able to find out where it came from. You're able to accept things that have happened to you that have made you the way that you are. You're able to consciously work on healing and releasing them. And you start to watch your personality crumble in front of you. And that's a really scary thing, because our personality, who we are, how we identify ourselves in the world, helps us feel safe in this world. It's kind of like a safety blanket. And so when you rip that safety blanket away and you're just naked and afraid and vulnerable, that's a really scary place to be in. And I was in that place, and the thought of sitting in front of a microphone and talking about that felt impossible. But that is my little vulnerable update. I'm really so happy to be back, and I've also been able to accept that this is such a lifelong journey, and if I need to take a break, that's fine, but I'm over convincing myself that who am I to share? Because I just do not resonate with that at all. I don't have all the answers. I'm not convinced that my way is the only way. I just know that I'm doing the work. I'm forcing myself to be extremely vulnerable majority of my life and take immense accountability for who I am, how I'm showing up, where I'm going, what I say. And that in itself is a form of medicine for a lot of people. And it's starting to feel selfish to hold back. So if I ever need to take a little breaky break again, I will not feel guilty to do so. But I've wanted to come back and film so many times, like I've said. But the fear of doing so, the fear of being vulnerable, like really took over. And I think it's because, again, I was just so deep into the shadow work. I was so deep in the dark night of the soul. I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. As for my own healing and my, I don't know, me as a speaker or as someone worthy of giving advice, I couldn't see it the way that I see it now. And it doesn't mean I'm never gonna have bad times again. But when you force yourself into darkness and you come out and you see the light again, once you do that a couple times, when you get back into that darkness, you just have such a deeper trust for yourself, and you know you're gonna do it. And I've recently had another, dark time, let's say, and just the way I view it is so different. I go into it, starting to feel a little different in my body, starting to, not resonate with certain thoughts that I have and mindset, and, I start to care about certain things less. Just another destruction of, or disruption in, who I think I am in my personality. And I'm able to accept it with much more open arms, knowing that I just trust myself. I trust to go through it. I trust to learn from it. And I get excited, to learn more about myself and get deeper, know myself deeper. That's the whole purpose of this game. Anyways, there's not much of a structure for today's podcast. I'm going to be honest. I didn't want to give myself too much pressure. I just sat down, I wrote some notes of things that I have gone through this past year that, again, I wouldn't say are completely healed, but I'm able to see how certain things have held me back. And now being on the other side, having a little more understanding for, just these past thoughts and mindsets that I had that no longer resonate. And yeah, if you are currently going through these things, struggling with these things, I just feel ready to share my perspective and how letting go of old beliefs and accepting new ones surrounding these topics that I want to talk about have truly transformed my life because of how they've just transformed the way that I view myself in this world. So one thing that I have really struggled with this past year, and I'm just now really able to see the light at the end of the tunnel and have truly redefined in my mind. I now have a new description of this, which is comparison. Comparing ourselves to other people. And this has held me back for so many years. So this has been like a huge lesson for me personally. I feel like for a lot of people, and it makes sense because, to really understand, to really sit with the fact that you constantly compare yourself to other people, and really like accept it. Become super aware and accept that you are constantly doing this. To sit in that awareness is hard. It's uncomfortable. You don't, or at least I didn't want to be that way. I didn't want to be that person. And I had so many moments where I wasn't that person and I was just free and in my own lane, doing my own thing, happy with myself and, what my life is turning into. I had many moments like that. So when I would fall deep into comparison and comparing myself to other people, it was a really uncomfortable place to be in. And I had to force myself to sit there, to sit with it, to discover it, and really understand, like, why does this have such a hold on me? And one thing I realized is this is not my fault. It's not your fault that you're comparing yourself to everyone. It's just the way that we've been trained as a society. Like, it's not even just your family. It goes back to, our schooling and grading and everything, comparing grades, comparing a smart kid to a not smart kid, comparing an athletic kid to a non-athletic kid. We are literally programmed to compare ourselves. And, I feel like in a way that someone can rebuttal this and see it as a positive thing is the thought of, which I believed for a long time, was, well, how am I supposed to know where I'm at? How am I supposed to know if I'm, ahead or behind or on track or not on track if I don't compare myself to other people? It's not a bad thing. I'm just comparing myself to see where I'm at. What I've realized is comparison is fine, and it is a good way to see where you are, where you've been, and where you're going. But when you compare outwards, you're doing it wrong. You can only compare yourself to your past self. That is the only comparison that is actually valid. You can't look outwards and be like, am I ahead of him? Or, am I behind this person? Or are they behind me, ahead of me? Where am I? Where do I place myself compared to all these other people? You can't possibly make that comparison, and here's why. Did you grow up with their parents? Did you have all of their experiences? Did you grow up as them with their thoughts and their mind and their body and their values? No. So how can you compare? You can only compare yourself to you because only you know this life. Only I know Sky's life in the ways that people that know me, people that are friends with me, people that I live with, they still don't know Sky's life the way I know Sky's life. No one knows your life, everything that goes into who you are. Only you know that. Even the person who knows you best still doesn't know what it was like to grow up as you, with your parents, your experiences, everything in between. There's absolutely no one. Even identical twins with the same parents, they don't share every single experience. And it's good to remember that it's always been you. It's always been your life. You're the only one who knows you, who grew up as you, who thinks like you, who dreams like you, who acts like you. And that is so special. Everybody has that. We all have that. And it's so special. We know everything about us, about our experience and, who we are. That is completely individual to every single person. And then you want to take that special thing that you get to experience and know only from your perspective and you want to compare it to someone else that you don't know, you've never been them, and they've never been you. And if you're really deep in the comparison game, like I know I once was, I hope these words are hitting you, but again, it might take time. It took me so much time to actually let go of that, to actually be able to believe what I'm preaching right now and have it be a belief of my own. It took so much time. And so, if we want to go back to the idea that, comparing yourself to see where you are in life, see how you're doing, you can only compare where you are, who you are, to who you've been. That is the only comparison that matters. And it's not even that it matters, it's just if you think that comparing is a way to, again, see where you are, have a track record, you cannot do that outwards. It just doesn't work that way. Only you know where you've been, know where you are, and know where you want to go. And that is the only thing that matters. I want you to consider letting go of the belief that you have to compare yourself to others to see where you are in life. And I want you to consider accepting the belief that as long as you can see steady growth within yourself and who you've been and who you are, that's your new belief of comparison. And the thing about that belief, you can take it or you can leave it, but that belief feels so much better. Looking back at who you've been and at who you are and who you want to be, that is the most motivating way to use comparison in a healthy way. And you'll feel it. Comparing yourself to other people never feels good. Never. Even if in the moment you think you're better than someone else, you're comparing yourself as you above them, that doesn't even feel good because that adds stress. And that feels like, well, I gotta keep staying quote unquote above them. And the same in reverse. When you compare yourself and you see yourself as below someone else, that does not feel good. Comparing yourself to other people never feels good and is not a healthy form of motivation. And what's so cool about this conversation and about all of this is I've experienced both. I've experienced being stuck in the comparison game and being, in my own lane. Fully. Only concerned with me, who I've been, who I am, and where I'm going. Because I've been able to experience both, it is so obvious for me now to see both. It is very obvious to experience another human being who is in their own lane. And the energy that person is putting out is just very different than the energy of someone who is stuck in the comparison game. And energy doesn't lie. You can feel it, you can see it, and you attract more of whichever one you're in. And when I was stuck in the comparison game, a lot of people around me were as well. A lot of people that I looked up to, a lot of people online, a lot of people in my real life were there as well with me. And being more stable in my own energy and my own life experience, and again, where I've been, who I am, and where I'm going, the people in my reality, physically, online, are also experiencing this. And I can feel it, I can see it, and it's inspiring. And when you're around people who are in their own lane, doing their own thing, letting their own unique magic shine through, and you're able to be in that energy as well for yourself, that is so uplifting versus, and it's hard to think back to exactly how it felt. I know it did not feel good, but that versus being stuck in the comparison game and having everyone around you stuck in that game as well, and who's above who's below who's doing well, who's doing bad, like, it is such a demotivating way to go through life. Whether you think you're above or below, if you are comparing yourself outwards, comparing yourself to other people, you may view it as motivating, but energetically, it is not. And it's going to bring more of that around you. And when it's who you are and what's around you, it is so easy to believe that that is real, that that is reality, when there's so many experiences, so many ways to live this life. If you told me years ago that I would be in a place, a genuine place, not a fake place, a genuine place of no longer comparing myself outwards, no longer comparing myself to other people to see where I'm at in life, I would not believe you. I would not understand that that exists, because it didn't exist within me. Therefore, I didn't see it in my outward reality. And what's so fun about recognizing this, being in this energy, allowing this energy to, motivate you, you get to realize on a deep level, not just a inspirational quote level, a deep level, that life is not a race. I used to see that in so many versions of that, of life is not a race and you go at your own pace. It just felt like blah, 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 like, okay, yeah, but why this person, why that? And when you let go, when you exit the comparison game and you are deep in your own lane, you realize on a deep level that life is not a race. It's an experience that is constantly unfolding in front of you. It has everything to do with you, not other people. And letting go of comparison allowed me to let go of the feeling of stress. That's what it is. It's stressful thinking that life is a race and you got to get here and achieve this and do this by this time. That is such a stressful environment to live in your mind. And thinking that life's a race, meaning, where am I at in this race? Am I in first place or last place? That can only be a reality for you if you are comparing yourself outwards. Looking at it now, it seems like such a non-logical way of thinking. And when we get caught in, I'm just going to use the word matrix, okay? When we get caught in the matrix, I find we start to think in a very non-logical way. And, I guess an example, like what I mean by that is a very narrow way of thinking. Maybe that makes more sense. Very narrow way of thinking, very non-logical to me. That resonates a little more. But, do you really think we came to this magical planet with this body to, experience everything around us? You really think we came here to feel stressed and unworthy the whole time? Feel stressed and unworthy and die. That's what we came here to do. We spawned on this planet to just grow up stressed, unworthy, and die. That's what we came here to do. That's what it feels like when you are stuck in the comparison game and when you think that life is a race. You are just stressed, feeling unworthy for years. I was in that for years. And a lot of people experience many years, many a good majority of their life in that state. And I just think it's because you're caught up. Because the second you back up, you look around, you realize what the fuck is going on around you, this crazy experience that we're having, it's a little easier to look at it as like, hey, maybe we didn't come here to feel stressed and unworthy and die. Maybe there's more to this experience. Maybe I fell a little off track. I just got a little wrapped up in the illusion of, society or what's expected from me. I just got a little lost. As soon as you snap back to the bigger picture, it's easier, in my opinion, to think logically of how you're maneuvering through this life. And, the thought of waking up stressed and unworthy every single day isn't the only way. It's not. I think it's also easy to stay stuck in your beliefs when you refuse to be honest with yourself. Because for me to be able to let go of comparing myself, for example, I had to be honest about the fact that I was comparing myself to people. That's the only way. You need to shine light on your shadows. That's what that means. And that sounds intimidating and scary. And it is. But if you can't be honest about who you are and how you're acting and your habits and just how you're maneuvering through life, if you can't be honest with yourself, then there's nothing to heal. Because in your mind, at least, there's nothing to heal. There's nothing wrong. This is who I am. Therefore, I continue being as I am, who I am, with this mindset, these habits. Doesn't feel good. I'm miserable in my life, but there's nothing to heal. Because you are so petrified to shine light on those shadows and admit, I don't like this about me, so let's figure it out. Let's look into it so we can let go of it. If you don't look into it, you're clueless. You're mindlessly acting in ways that don't represent who you are or who you want to be. And the thing is, the more aware you become about the things that you don't like about yourself, the more you realize that at your core, you were never those things. And that's how taking accountability is. It's not defeating. It's so liberating to sit there and shine light on your shadows, on the dark parts of you, the ways that you act that don't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be that way, but it's quote unquote who you are. No, it's not. Being who you are is always going to feel good. So when you're disappointed in yourself, in the way that you're acting, in the beliefs that you have, great, let it go. It's not who you are. Shining light on your shadows doesn't mean, taking accountability for the parts of yourself that you don't like. I think that's really scary, and the thought of doing that seems defeating because you think, if I ignore this, then I don't have to admit that this is who I am. I don't have to admit that I'm the bad guy. I don't have to admit that maybe I'm damaged. Maybe I have a little trauma to work through. I don't have to even go there. But then you are acting non-authentically. It's not who you are. It doesn't feel good when you act that way. It doesn't feel good when you have that thought. Therefore, it's not who you are. Take accountability. Look at it, realize you're acting unauthentically. Look at these parts that you don't like. Sit with it, get to the root of it, just being aware. I think that's where I was, again, bringing it back to April 2022. I was aware of all these parts of myself that I didn't like. Almost too aware. Too aware, and it was like overwhelming. I was like, I felt in the moment, I felt pretty defeated. So I can understand, like, on a personal level how it feels defeating to admit all that and take accountability for all that, but it's not. It is so liberating because you shine light on it, you see it. It's all laid out in front of you. The ways that you act, the ways that you react to people, the ways that you speak, the beliefs that you have about the world and about others and about yourself. You look at all of it, like on a screen, let's say. It's all written out on a screen. Everything about you, let's say. And you get to check mark the parts of you that feel authentic, that feel good. You're able to then see all the other things with no check mark next to it. And you realize, I'm carrying all this shit with me when I can't even identify with it. It's not even me, acting this way, this belief, whatever. I can't even put a check mark next to it because it does not resonate. It's not me. And you're able to let it go. That's how it's liberating. It's not defeating. It's not sitting there and being like, well, I'm such a bad person and I suck. And look at all these things that suck about me. It's like, look at all these ways I've been acting and maneuvering through life that isn't even who I am. Oh my, how liberating. I can let it go. I can let it go and allow more room to be more of who I am. You can't have all this, let's call it baggage of just, parts of yourself, that you don't like. Letting go of it, which again takes time. It's not just like a one-day thing like I thought it was a year ago. Letting go of it is crazy. It allows so much more room to develop parts of you that had to almost like stay small because there was no room for that part of you to develop because there was all this other space was taken up by things that, again, weren't even you didn't even resonate with, but you had to hold on to because you refused to let it go because you refuse to be aware of it in the first place. So if it doesn't exist in your mind, it's just like in your suitcase and you don't know that it's there, so it doesn't matter. The second you know it's there and you don't want it there, you take it out. You take it out, and then so many other parts of you start to develop. And it just feels so good to be in a place where I'm so committed to continuing to knowing me and developing me and evolving into more of me. And a lot of this stuff is seen as woo-woo, which is so crazy to me. Growth and evolution is not woo-woo. It's low-key the whole point of why we're here. And so if you think that it's woo-woo, then maybe this is not the podcast for you. Or maybe it is, because maybe it'll help release that thought. Anyways, I think I'm gonna end it there for this podcast. I feel like we talked about a lot. I feel like this seemed so scary and overwhelming when I decided to get back into it, but closing out this podcast and knowing that I feel safe enough to do this again feels right. It feels good. And I feel like I just want to end it off with that and let you know that whatever thing you want to do that feels so scary to do, just start. I can't even tell you how long I let this camera play before I even said a word. I think it was close to 7 minutes. Meaning I sat here for 7 minutes with everything, lights on, record on, notes out, and I couldn't even say hi. Because the thought of entering this felt too big. And again, I'm closing it out and I feel so good. I feel amazing. And thank you so much for listening or watching if you watch this on YouTube. Again, this is my first time doing a podcast while also filming it, so hopefully I looked at the camera enough. But yeah, that's everything for today. I hope you guys have an amazing day. I hope this helped you. Please share if it did. And yeah, I'll see you guys in my next episode. Thank you so much. Bye.